I have a question.
For me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the holidays are over. Christmas is gone. New Year's Eve and New Year's Day are gone past. When is the Christmas tree coming down?
Oh.
When are you taking that thing down?
So it actually is not picked up in the video right now.
Oh.
So I know I did a little crop right now. So no one can see that the Christmas tree is actually still up, whether you're listening or watching. It is probably February.
Okay.
And that's not because I want it up. That's pure laziness, and I just don't have the time to take it down.
Okay.
But I want it up in the meantime. Like, it's a delight. I love it. So why take it down, you know?
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Well, I'm wondering, when can I take down the Taylor Swift portraits behind
Never.
me?
Those are all year long.
They're going to stay up the entire time?
Yeah,
I'd like
that's my apartment.
I'm going to try to work with Kayla here to try to get the on-air sign, which if you're listening, you can't see it. But if you're watching, I held up the on-air sign.
See it.
Yeah, well, you can see it a little bit better. It's not blinding anybody. But I'm going to try to hang that up over a Taylor Swift portrait behind me.
Absolutely not. Here's what we're going to do is we're going to switch spots because up on that brick wall, there is a nail. So you can easily just take that painting off and then put that up behind you.
You'd have to be angling it halfway towards the ceiling.
No.
I'd barely be in it.
It's fine.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Get me out of the visual. I get it.
No, we'll figure it out.
No, I need to be in the visual, especially today. I got some new things ready. So the hat says, ask me about my podcast. That's a new addition. And then the sweatshirt is a redo or reDON'T sweatshirt. And the on-air thing. So got all three. I'm all good Christmas gifts that I got.
It's true.
So people support the pod. I appreciate it.
It's true. It's true. Great gifts all around.
Yeah.
I'm not supporting it today.
Yeah,
I'm just here.
No material over there.
I'm supporting it with my delightful voice and beautiful face.
Terrible.
Yeah. What more do you want from me? It's what I do for work. It's what I contribute to this as well.
Yeah, okay. So today on Redo or reDON'T, another episode, I'm Kyle.
And I'm Kayla.
And today we're talking about a very different, like literally the polar opposite of any Christmas movies that we've been doing. Like about as opposite as you can get from a Christmas movie. Kind of going in the horror direction. Is this the first horror film that we've done?
Yeah.
On this podcast, yeah?
Yeah. I would remember if we did one.
Yeah. I mean, the Santa Clauses was so bad that it might have been horrific.
But not scary.
Yeah. Wasn't going for that. The first film is actually like a horror classic. If you look up any list of like the top horror films of all time, you're going to find this movie on it. We're talking about The Shining, starring Jack Nicholson, directed by Stanley Kubrick. Came out, 1980?
Just 1980.
1980 on the dot, okay.
Yep.
And its legacy sequel, Dr. Sleep, starring Ewan McGregor and directed by Mike Flanagan. Mike Flanagan is kind of like I say trying, which maybe is undermining him because he's kind of, been having a career of it, but like he's making a name for himself as like in the horror genre in like today's day and age. Do you remember when I was talking about the TV show on Netflix that was like Edgar Allan Poe themed?
Okay.
But it was called The Fall of the House of Usher. And that was directed and I think written by Mike Flanagan, just like this show or this movie was.
Okay.
So yeah, and he's just done some other Netflix shows that are like horror shows that were well received. So he's just kind of like been trying to cement himself in like, for a name of being one of the best directors and writers in the horror genre, especially in today's, day and age in movies and TV. The weird thing about these two films that we're reviewing as opposed to like any of the other ones that we've done is that both of them come from source material.
Yes.
Right? They're both they're
both from Stephen King novels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I knew The Shining was. Because there's an infamous story where Stephen King saw The Shining with Jack Nicholson when Stanley Kubrick made it. And Stanley Kubrick is like one of the greatest film directors of all time. I mean, all of his films are like they're all cult classics. Like Stanley Kubrick, even though he's, passed for many years now, like has such a fan base and a following behind him. But yet, Stephen King, as much as that film is regarded as one of the best and Stanley Kubrick's one of the best directors and Jack Nicholson's performance and everything, he still disliked it.
Really?
He didn't like the adaptation of his own book.
I feel like he may be, and this is just a guess. This is just a feeling based off of the vibe I get from him. There are no facts to this. I feel like Stephen King may be the pickiest person when it comes to someone making a movie of his books.
Probably.
Right? Don't you just get that from him?
Yeah, I do. But he has so many of his books have been made into movies or TV shows too. And like, I think that he has such a reputation as an author, as like having such great books, but not all of the movies translate well and like get well received as movies or TV shows.
Really?
So for this one to be the complete opposite, like he's made some books that were well received as books, get made into a movie or TV show and get negative ratings. And then this one gets like the highest regards and he hates it.
Interesting.
Yeah, right? It's just like, that's like what's infamous about it is that how can you dislike this film that the rest of the population loves?
Or when you're a writer, I can only imagine that you have this vision in your mind, not for a movie basis, but just when you're writing, you think of things and you picture in a certain way and you picture it in a certain place. So then maybe just when they did create it, it was not ideally what he had in his mind when he was writing it.
Yeah, but the tough thing with that though is like, I don't think that the writer of a book, like if you're the writer of a book, you just sign away the rights to the book and you hand it over, and it is completely up to the director to make it his own vision now. So like you kind of have to know that. Like Stephen King's not on set every day saying, I want it to be like this, I want it to be like that. You're not the director anymore. You're just signing over the story. So you're risking that when you give it up. What's funny is I think very few people know this, is there's like a TV movie of The Shining that like was not even sold in theaters. It was like, no one's ever seen it. Not a lot of people have seen it. But Stephen King actually says that is a better adaptation of his book.
Really?
Than
the
this
movie
film.
is?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh, maybe we should have watched that as well.
Yeah, I feel like
Probably
that would.
not.
Well, I feel like nobody's watched that. I don't think anybody even knows that it exists. But
No.
that's like the infamous story. That's how I know it, is because it's like greatly debated. One of the best, novel writers disliking the work of one of the best directors working on the same story.
Do you know he has a corgi?
Who?
Stephen King.
Stephen King has a corgi?
Yep, that's my contribution to this
Oh,
podcast.
so you love him. You love him.
I almost could have run into him on multiple occasions when I was living in Bangor. And one of the reporters that I worked with, she covered a movie premiere for one of the movies that, actually, it was 2019. Could it have been Dr. Sleep?
Probably was.
I know. Now I'm thinking back. Maybe it was.
Yeah.
Should have gone to that movie premiere. But he was there in Bangor.
Oh, that's awesome.
And yeah, so the reporter got to meet him and stuff. I don't think he did an interview. I don't know
Yeah.
why he would with local news.
Yeah.
But I had could have had so many encounters with that
I was
man.
going to say, that would be a cool guy to meet,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100% I'm sure it would have been. His
Yeah.
house was cool. But his house is exactly what you would have expected Stephen King's house to be.
I'm sure.
It had like gargoyles on the fence. It had like this
yeah.
really big elaborate fence around it naturally as it would. But it was a huge but older looking red house. And it had that fence around it that just had these creatures. And what was really cool about his house, actually, is they had an old tree in his front yard. And it died, and it was now just becoming a danger. So he cut part of it down. But there was a wood carver that was also in the Bangor area. So instead of completely chopping down the tree, this has nothing to do with the movie, by the way. But instead of completely chopping down the tree, he had the main-based wood carver come in and make a tree sculpture out of that tree, and there's characters from his books, and there's his corgis. That's how I know he has corgis carved into that tree.
That's really cool.
Isn't it kind of cool?
Yeah, it just sounds like he's the type of person that fully embraces his stigma that surrounds him. Like he's considered to be the king of horror in books.
Yeah.
So he just fully embraces like the stigma that surrounds him and like accepts the fact that he's the king of horror in novels. So he just like, it sounds like that house, he is like, yep, let's make it as horrific to keep in consistency with what my like reputation is And yeah, I feel like that's just something he likes to surround himself with, is like the
His
horror.
characters.
Yeah, his
Yeah.
characters. And
There was a pet cemetery museum
Yup. So that's
in
again,
downtown Bangor.
that's one of the movies that didn't do
Yes.
too well.
Oh, it didn't.
No, that didn't do too well.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Also partially filmed in Bangor.
Yeah, all of them seem to be.
Yeah.
But Doctor Sleep.
Anyways, yeah, we can go back to what we're here for.
Yeah.
I
Doctor.
can't contribute about the movies, but I can contribute about Stephen King.
Yeah,
What do you
no,
wanna
listen,
know?
it's interesting feedback. That's what the listeners come for. You know what I mean? They listen for all the interesting facts. But Doctor Sleep, so comes out in 2019. So 39 years, almost 40 years to the date later. But Doctor Sleep is also a novel. So it's Stephen King wrote a sequel book to The Shining. And Mike Flanagan kind of he was tasked with making a sequel to the movie, in a sense. Like, he definitely makes callbacks to that 1980 film. He's not just making some movie. It's not like he just read the book and then said, let me make a movie off of it.
Mm-hmm.
He is using that 1980s film as like a blueprint.
And there are scenes from the 1980s movie that they just put in Doctor Sleep.
Right. All of it is very much so like using that first film and then expanding upon it.
Right.
It's not really like they separate it too much.
Right.
He's not remaking The Shining. He has to now use parts of the first film and stay consistent with that as he makes a second one, but also go off of what does this story look like when Stephen King wrote it in the book.
Right. I want to read you this, though, because it goes based off of different shots that were taken from the 1981 and put in Doctor Sleep. It says that most of the shots were recreated in duplicate sets to make it look the same, but there were 3 shots that were actually reused. It was the aerial shot of the water and the island.
Okay.
If you know the scene, you remember it.
Yep.
And the 2 shots after it of the car driving on the mountain road. So the shots were degrained, recolored as day for night, and they had snow digitally added. But they took them from the first movie and just edited them.
It sounds, I know some like little tidbits about these films, and it sounds like they took every single like attention to detail for Doctor Sleep to make it feel like it was the first film.
Yeah.
And set in the same place. Like, Mike Flanagan tried to go off of like blueprints of the first film's sets to kind of like painstakingly recreate it so that they could film it. And it's like, I kind of like and love that they did put that much detail and attention to it. You know what I mean? Like, they really they felt like they owed it to the fans. Like, let's give them like something very true to the first that they loved. And even if it means like that we have to, freeze the frames of the first one and figure out like how are we going to recreate this, or like, digitally edit that much. They put in the amount of work that they wanted and the fans deserved to make it feel like the first film again.
Right. It definitely was something that, like you said, the fans deserved, because I feel like The Shining is one of those movies that if you mess it up in any way, the fans are going to riot. They're going to be pissed.
Yeah.
So I feel like they didn't even have a choice. They had to make it so exact.
Yeah.
And so to the first one.
If
or else
Mike
it would've just ruined
Flanagan,
it.
if Mike Flanagan is going to undertake that task of, I'm going to make the sequel to The Shining, you're not just making, a sequel to any random film that you like. You're making a sequel to a cult classic, one of the best horror films of all time. Stanley Kubrick, is known for his work, and that is, Stanley Kubrick is known for his attention to detail. If you read some of the fascinating stories about when he was on sets, like he once did, he would take so many takes. He's done, he would shoot one scene in over 100 takes because he was such a perfectionist that he wanted to get it perfect.
Then he would be the guy for this movie, I feel.
That's why he was perfect for The Shining.
Yeah.
That's why there is so much detail that is, can't be overlooked because every little thing is precise. But that's why, like you said, Mike Flanagan, has to know when he's going to make a sequel to that he has to do it with the exact same, like, flawless mentality of it needs to be a certain way.
Right.
And, I think that he kind of does. I think here's my biggest review of Doctor Sleep for the people out there listening and like who haven't seen it but want to know. If you've seen it, like you probably, you could decide whether or not this is in a line with your thoughts on it. But for the people who haven't seen it, this would be my critique and review of it. It is a good film as its own horror film. You know, I haven't read the book, so I don't know how closely it resembles the book Doctor Sleep, but it feels very much so like it is doing its own horror thing, very different than the first film almost. Like the first film is kind of, yeah, there's like some paranormal activity going on in that hotel that Jack Nicholson and his family are staying at. And the point of like Doctor Sleep is that Jack Nicholson's son from the first film is Danny Torrance, and Danny now has grown up in the second one, and that's what Doctor Sleep revolves around. But the first film is kind of more of a psychological thriller, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
agree with that.
there are jump scenes and it's scary and everything, but it's really about a man slipping into madness and then kind of becoming a psychopathic killer because he is, you know, slipping into madness. The second film feels more so like it is just a horror film, a lot more like leaning into the paranormal activity of things. Like the main villains, you know, feed off of humans, and some humans have the shining, which is a point of the first one, and the second one too. Like they have this, I don't know if you'd call it extraterrestrial. What would you call like they have like magical powers?
The word that I would think to describe it would be almost like a telepathy.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good synonym for it. Like,
yeah. With they're not zombies, are they?
No, but they're like, again, they're kind of these.
They were a cult.
They're almost like ghosts,
Yeah.
you know, because they don't live forever. They live for longer than the normal human would. They almost live forever. You know what I mean?
Right.
You find out later on that they actually are mortal, but they're essentially like ghosts, and they feed off of humans who have the shining, and they kill them and whatever. But it just feels more so like it feels like a 2019 horror film plot.
It does.
You know, and the 1981 was a little bit more like you're afraid of Jack Nicholson, who is a normal guy.
Right.
He just goes crazy and goes on a rampage, you know, where he might kill his family. So two very different types of horrors between the films, I would say.
If I remember correctly from the first one, which it's been a very long time since I've seen The Shining, Doctor Sleep was a little bit more blood and guts.
Yes.
Which is not for me at all. Once you start getting into the blood and guts, you'll lose me. I'm out. I don't care how fake it looks. But it was a 2019 film, so it's not like it did look fake by any means.
Yeah, so the Shining, it really is like, and it's so good that a movie can pull this off. It really is more so about like like what scares you is the craziness of it. It is, like I said, it is a psychological thriller. And yeah, there's, you know, ghosts and there's whatever inside the place where like the hotel where they're staying. And, you know, you'll say, you know, that there's more blood and guts in the 2019 Doctor Sleep. And there's the famous scene in 1980, The Shining, where like the elevator doors open up and blood streams out. But that's not like, you know, as a result of a killing.
Right.
Or anything like that. And even, I mean, spoiler alert, but even like Jack Nicholson, as he dies in the 1981, he dies from freezing.
Right.
You know, he freezes to death. So it's not even nearly as like, again, I think that that's because the 2019 one just is going for it wants to feel like a 2019 horror film.
Sure.
It's got the jump scares, the ghosts, the, you know, blood and guts, like you were saying.
Yeah. I feel like now, in today's day and age, they always seem to go for blood and guts.
Yeah.
And that's just the horror movies that you're going to get nowadays.
Yeah, it is. I mean, everything tries to be a lot more raw now. I mean, everything's trying to be, you know, a lot more, like here's a funny thing, right? The Godfather is considered one of the best films of all time. I don't think there's a single F-bomb in The Godfather. And that was a rated R film back in 1970s, right? There's not a single F-bomb. Now it's like you can watch CBS, or not CBS, but like you could watch FX at 8 p.m. on a Wednesday, and there's F-bombs that they're not even editing out. Everything's trying to be a lot more raw now. You know, they used to cut away from violent scenes on television. Now you watch it in syndication, they're not cutting away from bloody and gory scenes.
I wish they would.
Yeah, but even at that, they can air that on whatever channel they want on TV.
I need to watch Doctor Sleep in a version that would have been edited for TV in the 1980s.
Yeah, right.
Then maybe I can actually watch it without closing my eyes.
Yeah, but then you're going to be like, this isn't scary at all. This is
fine.
a great,
That's good. That's what we want.
This is a feel-good family film because they took out all of the scariness.
The movie is 5 minutes long.
Yeah. They took out everything that's scary about it. I kind of felt like when we were watching it together that I could kind of tell that you weren't really invested in it, and I think it was because it just like wasn't up your alley. I mean, those type of horror films I don't think are your type of movies.
They're not at all. I don't like horror movies. They're not my kind of movie. I don't like the blood and guts. I feel like with that one too, eventually it kind of got to a point where it was losing me because there was just so much happening at once that my non-horror brain couldn't connect the dots of how this little girl was connected to the main character, how the main character was connected to the quote-unquote zombies that aren't zombies, aren't ghosts, but ghosts, those people. For a while, it just took me a minute to connect it all together because they don't explain it either. I mean, that's kind of the thing about the movie is for a while they don't necessarily explain, correct me if I'm wrong because I totally could have missed this, they don't explain how they all connect and it plays out as the movie does.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say is they don't explain it in like layman's terms. You kind of just develop it over time where you're realizing like, okay, so Abra, who is now the young girl that Danny Torrance as his older self in Doctor Sleep has like this connection through the shine that they both have, like the telepathy that you were talking about.
Yeah.
They have a connection and therefore they can kind of, everybody who has the shine is almost connected in a way. They can tap into the other person's shine. So they're finding out that those ghosts and killers that are trying to kill people who have the shine, they're trying to stop them. It's not explained in like basic terms like, hey, here's what, I have the shine and you do, which means we're connected. It's like you can see that Danny is getting flashes of what Abra is seeing because they are connected through it. And Abra can see the victims that are being killed by the ghosts and where they were because they're connected through the shine too.
See, you explaining it to me right now is making more sense.
No, I was able to. I wasn't lost on that. I was able to pick up on that.
I was lost, but I also just think there were certain points where I had to look away because I'm like, I can't stomach this.
Yeah.
So then I look away and then I get distracted and now I'm not fully invested in it at all.
If you're the type of person like Kayla who doesn't like blood and guts, it would be a tough film to watch. It's 2.5 hours long too.
More of the reason.
So it's a little bit of a long one, and they therefore take their time explaining and getting to the fact that like, oh, these people are connected and what they're trying to do, and it's a lot of build up. What's funny is then, so after 2.5 hours, like it's a lot of build up. There's a lot of blood and guts scenes, which is why you were turning away from most of it. But then the last half hour is just complete fan service for the people who love The Shining.
Sure.
It is 100% like, all right, you've stuck with us for the first 2 hours, and now we're just going to give you everything that you want, and we're going to do all the callbacks to The Shining, all of the homages to The Shining. Like, that's where the detail to the sets come in. And it is just, there's one point where the main villain, who's played by Rebecca Ferguson, is the main ghost that's like killing these people with the shine, is in the hotel where the first film takes place. And she's walking down the hallway and she stops at the famous elevators and they open up and blood seems to be rushing out of it. Yeah. It does nothing to the movie. It has no relevance. Right. It is just so that people can look and be like, that's from the first film. That's 100%. From the first one, and there's a lot of that in the last 30 minutes. And, the famous scene is Jack Nicholson running with the axe through the hotel, and then he chops down the door and he yells, "Here's Johnny." This one has Danny running through the exact same hallways with an axe, a lot of things where it's just like, oh, this is like the first film. They're doing the same thing from the first. And it's just fan service for the last half hour.
But it really isn't up until, like you said, that last half hour, which is kind of interesting.
Oh,
How
100%.
For a full 2 hours.
For the first 2 hours.
100% their own.
For the first 2 hours, it feels like it's trying to be just a 2019 horror film. It doesn't feel like it's trying to be The Shining from 1980. Then the last half hour, you're like, okay, this is trying to be, they're taking everything from Stanley Kubrick's film and just compacting it into half an hour to be like, all right, here's the payoff. The maze that, Jack Nicholson chases his family through at the end of The Shining is in this film. It is, the last half hour is definitely fan service.
Yeah, 100%. And watching that last half hour, it did kind of bring me back to The Shining, because again, it had been a little while.
Me
so
too.
Like, oh, I remember that.
Me
okay,
too.
It's coming back to me now.
They pulled it off. They
did.
I worry
They did.
about it when they try to do that, but they pull it off. I too was like, oh, this is kind of cool. It's the two twin girls that are like, come play with us, Danny. Like all the famous stuff. And
I would wonder if that's in the book, or if that truly was just the movie catering to the first one.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't read the books.
No, I haven't either.
Yeah. So, the reason why they're trying to go with the fan service is for the nostalgia and to give the fans what they want, which leads us into, was it necessary to make a film, that's kind of for the fans, but also kind of not at the same time? And I would say, yeah, it has a source material. You're not even necessarily just trying to go off of, hey, I really like Stanley Kubrick's 1980 film, and maybe I could try my hand at making it too. That I would worry about. It has its own book to go off of. So that's why I kind of think that, like, okay, yeah, you're trying to make a callback to the first one. You love the first one. You're trying to expand upon it, but you're doing it with like the right material. Like if you're going to do it, that's the right way to do it, is to go off of like, hey, I'm going to go off of what Stephen King wrote in this second film. I'm not just making it up off my own, because then you run the risk of being like, wait, no, that would never have happened in the first one. Or if you take your own creative liberties with it, that's where things can kind of go awry. But he wasn't. He was going off of Stephen King's, who made the first one, going off of his source material of what would happen in the second one, then using that and Stanley Kubrick's film from 1980 as two blueprints to make this second film in 2019. So if he's going to do it, I think that that's the right way to do it. So therefore, I would say it's necessary.
I would say so, and I think it goes back to my point that I made when we were talking about how The Grinch Stole Christmas, which Dr. Seuss and Stephen King, totally the same.
Yeah.
But because it was based off of books, there was already, like you just said, they already had the material for it. And that was my reasoning for when we were talking about how The Grinch Stole Christmas is it necessary? Yes, because it's really just an adaptation of something that already had the source material to provide it with a plot. And so I would say, basically the exact same reasoning as what I said with how The Grinch Stole Christmas.
Yeah.
But what you just said too, it has a book to base it off of.
Yeah.
How could it not be necessary when Stephen King himself thought it was?
Right.
Who am I to say no?
Yeah, no. And how many times have directors made films off of books? You know what I mean? It's
nothing new.
Yeah, he's not taking it and making it to going with his own direction. He is using the book and the first film to jointly put together and make this Dr. Sleep come to life.
Right.
So I'm going to give it the redo. I think that it was like the right amount of different, but also giving us like a little bit of a callback to the first one. I kind of almost am judging it more so on like, was it a good horror film by itself? Because that's kind of what it was going for a while there. It feels like it's you could look at it as its own standalone like 2019 horror film. You would be lost in the last 30 minutes.
Right.
But up to that, you could look at it and just be like, I just like horror. Like if you just like horror, you could watch this film and just still, and even if you haven't seen the first one, which if you like horror, you probably have, but you could watch this and just like it for what it is for the first 2 hours. And it would still be a good, like if you like horror films, you would like this one.
You would still like the last half hour, because if you haven't seen the first one, you're not going to understand what they were pulling from. But
You'd be a little lost. You'd be like, why are these elevators opening up and blood's just coming out of them?
You could say that for the first one. It could just be some random, like, all right, they kind of took a twist at the end.
I don't know. There's like the old, like, naked woman that's in the bathtub. Like, if you were watching that in the second one and just seeing that, you'd be like, what's going on?
Because the naked woman they do have at the beginning.
Yeah, but you'd watch that and you'd be like, what the hell is the relevance of that?
I think
it's because of the first film.
Yeah.
Anyways, as a standalone horror film, I give it the redo, and also like it gives you the right amount of callback to the first one and the fan service in that last half hour. So all of it I liked. It's not like I love it. It's not the best thing in the world, but I liked it. It was good. Redo.
I can't. How do I put this? I don't like horror films. I've already said it on this episode. I don't like horror films, but it would be stupid of me to say that I give it the reDON'T. Then I'm going to base my redo or reDON'T solely on the reviews that it got. I'm going to put my opinion aside because both of the movies got fantastic reviews. IMDb was a 7.3 out of 10.
I got ahead of us. I jumped right to the redo or reDON'T without going to the ratings.
You did, but I'm
Good.
wrapping it all in
Good.
because
All right.
I
Thank
don't
you.
like horror films. So I can't sit here and say, oh, I didn't like it, I give it the redo, because I know that this is such a cult classic, especially The Shining. People love it. So many people love it. I can't give it the reDON'T because it's just, the data doesn't add up. But for Dr. Sleep, IMDb 7.3 out of 10, Rotten Tomatoes was 78. The audience score was 89%, and it was even high for the first one, The Shining. IMDb was 8.4 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes was 83%, and then the audience score was 93%.
Yeah.
So it stayed true.
An 8.4 on IMDb is like almost unheard of. Like that's one of the highest rated. So
right. So I'm going to give it the redo solely based off of the stats of these movies, especially the second one, and just I've never heard a bad thing about this movie. People that I've heard have watched it.
So you can respect the fact that it is like
it held true to what it should have.
Yeah, or that like it is, well received in its genre. It's a well respected movie, and you can take it for what it is in that sense. You know, because if it was, in your subjective opinion, it would kind of be swayed, right? Is that what you're getting at?
It would. Yeah. I mean, I don't like horror films, so I can't sit here and say it was the best movie. I think it was well done.
Yeah, so
in
there
aspects.
You go. Yeah.
I take it for what it is. I think it was well done. It was well written. The scenes were great, but it wasn't my type of movie.
Yeah.
But I can't give it the reDON'T when it's such a highly acclaimed remake.
Yeah.
So it does get the redo, and I think because of the statistics and the ratings, but also just because it did have Stephen King's novel to base it off of.
Yeah.
So that also boosts it in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I get that. I mean, so redo from both of us then. I'm glad that you brought back in the ratings. I was getting ahead. But if we're done with that segment, now
No, there's nothing else.
There you go. All right, then we'll wrap it up with anything you're watching. We saw Anyone But You. I'm not even going to do Anyone But You.
So we're talking about a movie that's right up my alley.
Yeah, there you go. Talk about that.
That's
Take the floor.
Right.
Take the floor.
I forgot about that. Okay, so we did see Anyone But You. Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney star in it. And basically they meet, kind of, you could say they have a one-night stand. And the next day, what is Sydney Sweeney's character's name?
B.
That's right. How could I forget that? So the next day, B, who's played by Sydney Sweeney, kind of leaves Glenn Powell's apartment and tries to go back because she's like, oh, I didn't get this guy's number. I really like him. She kind of hears him over saying these rude things about her, that she's a mess and all these things, and he would never want to see her again, to his roommate. But, he was just trying to be that guy and not be the cool guy and not say that he actually liked her regardless. So then fast forward, they both get invited to a wedding, and B's parents want her with her ex-fiance, and so they kind of have to pretend to like each other when they can't stand each other because of their past. It's a rom-com. I don't need to tell you how it ends. I won't spoil it, but we all know how it ends. They end up actually falling in love with each other.
I won't spoil it, but here's the spoiler. They end up together.
I don't have to spoil it because, I mean, everyone knows how it's going to end. It's a rom-com. But I thought that was a great movie.
Okay, well, I wouldn't go as far as to call it great. It was good. I liked it. But again, like I told you when we left that theater, I wasn't like, there's not one scene where I was laughing out loud. Not one. I was like, oh, that's funny. And all of it is like, there certainly wasn't anything bad in it. It wasn't slow at any point. It wasn't like the humor wasn't working. It was just kind of like subtle little jokes. Nothing that was like the most hysterical, punchline or hysterical skit.
Yeah,
It was just.
But I feel like rom-coms never have that. It always
There
just
are a
is
few.
corny. A few.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
calm
that's it.
part
A
of
few.
rom-com. It's supposed to make you laugh. That's the comedy part of it.
But it was cute.
No, it was cute. That is exactly, like, that is a fair assessment of it, is to say it's cute. If you're like, he was hysterical, I would say no way. But it was cute, feel good, and, like, it kept me interested. It certainly wasn't boring or bad by any means.
No. If you want something fun and lighthearted, the
Yeah.
opposite of The Shining.
That was a
there's
good
your
one.
movie.
Yeah, that was a good one. I watched a movie also on Netflix. It's called The Killer, and it came out, 3 months ago. It came out in November of 2023. It's on Netflix. It stars Michael Fassbender, and it's directed by David Fincher. It's about just essentially like this assassin who's hired to do a job. He's hired to kill somebody, and he messes it up, which he's never done before. It's like he prides himself in being precise and that he always sticks to a plan. And then this one goes awry, and it leads to a series of unfortunate events that happen from that. And it was good. It was kind of, I don't know if this was people's like critique of it. I wonder if it was, but it almost like didn't really have a plot.
Oh.
Yeah, it was kind of just like this guy running around and trying not to be killed, but trying to kill the people that are trying to kill him and whatever. So it didn't really have a plot, but at the same time was like interesting enough. So it wasn't as, with a name like The Killer, it wasn't just constantly blood and guts or like ridiculous fight scenes or shooting scenes. It was, I don't know, it was a different take. It was almost kind of like giving more credit to the audience and trying to make it a little bit smarter of a film than just to be like, oh, cool, guns and fight scenes. So I respect that, the fact that they actually tried to make it like a little bit more intricate and step it up a level than just the normal like fight scenes and cool shooting scenes action film. So
Okay.
yeah, I don't know. That one was good, not great. It was just okay, I would say. But that's what I watched recently. It's on
Okay.
Netflix.
Hey, it's something.
Yeah.
Better than me.
No, you watched a film recently too. Anyone but you.
It was good. It was good. There
Yeah.
will be more. There will be more films that we're gonna watch.
Yeah, stick around for whatever we got next week.
Is next week what I'm thinking of?
Yeah.
Is next week's what we're seeing?
Yeah, we're gonna go see another film in theaters.
Look at us.
Yeah.
This one we can actually use for the podcast though.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
This one, my expectation is on the floor.
Okay, and with that, come back for next week's episode of Redo or
I know
Redon't.
how to do a teaser or what.
Yeah,
my
you do.
expectation is on the floor.
Wow, all right. Maybe just even skip next week's episode. No, that's all right.
No. You need to see. You need to
No.
come back and see if the movie sold itself for me
Yeah.
or if it didn't. Because again, the bar is gone.
Yeah, so
It's so low, it's gone.
tune in next week to see what Kayla's talking about and see if it exceeds her expectations.
Who would have thought? But thanks for listening and thanks for watching.
Thanks.